Hey gang, it's Squill, and with the Owl House coming to an end very soon, I wanted to make one last video commemorating what I consider to be the best episode of the show. An episode that, in my opinion, truly represents the best qualities of the Owl House. And while there's tons of great episodes I could have chosen, such as Hollow Mind or Knock Knock Knockin' on Hootie's Door, I decided to go with an episode that's a bit more personal to me. This is why Reaching Out is a perfect episode of The Owl House. Part 1, Luz's Conflict. At the beginning of the episode, Luz picks up her phone to be reminded of an annual event she's supposed to partake in with her mom. It's not made clear yet what this event is, but it very clearly bothers Luz. Keeping the event itself a mystery not only makes for a great reveal later on in the episode, it also allows us to focus more on Luz's inner conflict than the event itself. Throughout the episode, Luz keeps trying to distract herself from the event she was reminded of earlier. First by trying to be productive, finding new glyph combos, creating a new door to the human realm, finding out what Belos' plan is. Then by roping herself into Amity's conflict, which we'll discuss more later on. This portrayal of Luz's anxiety really hits home with me, as I too often try to distract myself from my own issues by helping out others. Luz being a kind and giving person is easily one of her best qualities, but she also needs to learn to focus on her own mental health from time to time. Also, and this is a bit of a side note, but I really like that the Letterman's jacket that Ida gives Luz early on in the episode is the same jacket that Luz continues to wear for the rest of Season 2, and for most of the Season 3 premiere. It helps make the events of this episode feel important and meaningful. But what's even more relatable to me is the way Luz's intrusive thoughts are portrayed. A couple of times in the episode, Luz realizes she doesn't really have much to do at this point, so we hear her thoughts as she sits there trying to think of a distraction. It perfectly encapsulates her fear of being alone with her thoughts. I often find myself freezing up when put in stressful situations, and sometimes even just remembering an event that brought me stress gets me anxious all over again. I also enjoy the symbolism here of Luz's phone buzzing whenever this happens, representing her intrusive thoughts buzzing around in her head. But eventually, Luz trying to distract herself gets Amity mad at her, since not only does she not understand what Luz is going through, but her distraction inadvertently led to Amity's father finding out what she's doing. Which transitions us to Part 2, Amity's Conflict. So earlier in the episode, Amity asks her father, Alador, to take her to the Bonesboro Brawl. This is because Alador also entered said brawl when he was a kid. Alador declines, however, as he wants Amity to enter the Emperor's Coven tryouts instead. However, Luz and Amity decide to enter the brawl anyways and skip the tryouts, which is what Luz uses to distract herself. This big brawl setting is a really fun backdrop to the episode. The Owl House usually has great action sequences, and while none of the fight scenes in this episode are among the best in the show, it's all some pretty solid stuff. But I do also really enjoy the dynamic between Amity and her father here. A good chunk of Amity's arc throughout the series involves her stepping out of her family's shadow and determining for herself what type of person she wants to be independent of her parents. This episode is very important for Amity's arc since not only does she actively defy her father, but she's also able to actually communicate her issues to him, which leads to Alador better understanding Amity and setting up his redemption at the end of Season 2. On a personal level, I don't find Amity's struggles here to be as relatable as Luz's, since I've pretty much always been the black sheep of my family, but it's still a fantastic side to this episode and very important for Amity's arc. I also gotta bring up just how adorable Amity's outfit is in this episode, and I wish she wore it in other episodes like Luz and her Letterman's jacket. Before we discuss the scene that really makes the episode for me, I do want to quickly go over the subplot between Ida and Edric. I don't have a ton to say about it as it's easily the weakest part of the episode, but that's only because the rest of the episode is so great. But I do really enjoy the dynamic between King, Ida, and Edric, and I think it was a good idea to flesh Ed out more, as he hasn't really had much time to shine on his own apart from his sister. We do also get to learn a bit more about the Day of Unity, which is always a plus. But with all that out of the way, we're now able to get to Part 3, the scene that makes the episode. The following scene is not only my favorite in the episode, but likely my favorite scene in the entire show. It's so beautiful. After Amity finds out that Luz lied to her about the abomination, she furiously runs off like a lot of characters in shows and movies do. If the Owl House were a weaker show, it would have needlessly dragged this conflict out for multiple episodes, just to ultimately feel pointless in the end. Think something similar to the Steven and Connie arc in Season 5 of Steven Universe, or the Mordecai and CJ garbage in Season 6 of Regular Show. But instead, Luz simply walks over to her so they can talk things out. It's such a great sign of maturity that instead of just being mad at each other for multiple episodes, the two just have an honest conversation in which they're open about their feelings. Before we discuss the conversation itself, we gotta talk about those visuals. Pink and purple are my two favorite colors, so obviously the scene is just visual eye candy for me. But I also love that the tree that Luz and Amity are sitting next to is the same tree we see them create during the Grom episode back in Season 1. It's like the tree itself is symbolic of their relationship, as they grow closer together every time it shows up. I hope it makes one last appearance in the finale. Anyways, Amity airs out her grievances towards Luz, and I pretty much love everything Luz says in response. She talks about how it's the anniversary of when her dad passed away, and she and her mom would pick flowers every year as a tradition. I love how before this she mentions that it happened a while ago. It shows that grief can still manifest itself even years after it already happened. I love that Luz mentions that her grieving doesn't excuse her actions. And I love that Luz mentions that she might be a little jealous of Amity, because even though she heavily disagrees with her father, at least she has a father to disagree with. And I like that the episode doesn't invalidate Amity's issues either. It's not like her struggles are unimportant just because Luz is grieving. Both of their issues are equally valid, and both deserve to be taken seriously. Everything about this scene just feels so real, like an actual conversation that two people could have. Everything from the dialogue to even Luz's body language is just absolutely perfect. The scene gains even more importance through Luz's video diaries we see in Season 3, which shows us that Luz's father is the person who actually introduced her to the Good Witch Azora, which ended up becoming her hyperfixation and helped shape the way she views the world. But along with all that, this scene and this episode as a whole holds a lot of importance to me personally. Since only a few weeks after this episode aired, I actually lost my dog to a brain tumor. That, combined with a few other aspects of my life that I don't really wish to discuss here, caused me a lot of stress and made me very emotional as a result. And while I'm definitely better now, I think it's safe to say that the summer of 2022 was easily one of, if not the worst period in my entire life. So to see a character like Luz, whom I already related to a ton before this episode, process a lot of the same trauma and anxiety that I was at the time, well, it really helped make me feel seen. And it helped me realize that the best way to get through this stress is simply by talking it out with people who I know care about me. So I'll always be thankful for this episode and the Owl House crew for helping me realize that. But while the previous scene is my personal favorite, I can't overlook just how beautiful the ending to this episode is too. I love how we never actually see the flowers make it to the human realm. The thought that maybe they could is more important than the reality that they probably won't. It's really just the perfect way to end an already perfect episode. I really will miss the Owl House when it's gone, as it was able to deliver such beautiful episodes and moments like this one. I definitely have my concerns going into the finale, but I'm very excited to see how the crew ends this amazing show. Please let me know what you're looking forward to seeing the finale in the comments. Squill out.